Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I am the American Hauntstorian, Alan Sircy. Glad you guys are here. And hey, can you believe it? 2026 is right around the corner. A couple more days. I guess we made it. It's so weird. This year has flown by. Seems like just the other day I was in St. Louis at Trans World, and then summertime I did a bunch of shows in Louisville, Knoxville. It's like, man, this year has blown by. A lot of fun. Put out some fun books this year. Hexed, Sausage King, Below the Trestle, the Pope Lit Goat Monster Story. And I've got a lot of stuff planned for 2026, so stay tuned for some more on that here in the coming weeks. Anyway, so what's your resolutions? Anybody got anything planned there to try to lose some weight or go on a trip? It's that time of year you make resolutions where things you want to do, things you want to change. So no changes here really, just more books, more ghost stories, more true crime, folklore, just weird, wild stuff. Make sure you're following us on Facebook, Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook, Southern Ghost Stories Instagram. You can find me on Twitter or X, whatever it's called. I'm at ATO Alan Sircy. You can find me on there. So yeah, when you're on Facebook, Instagram, send me questions or comments. I try to answer those. I've got a bunch I've kind of tucked away for a future episode, but I've been trying to get to a few because I've got a lot in the backlog here. So I got a question on the Southern Ghost Stories Facebook the other day from Ingrid Meyer. And she's asking me about ghost stories from Gulf Shores, Alabama. And I was in Gulf Shores, I guess it was last spring. I was finishing up my Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales Alabama book. And I really didn't find anything in Gulf Shores particularly. But with that being said, over in Pensacola, just right down the street, have you guys heard about the Pensacola Lighthouse? They say it's haunted. Several people have died in the home. There's a young lady they say inhabits the place now. So when I went there, I was also researching my Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales Florida book that came out. I guess it was a year or two ago. And I went to the lighthouse, took a tour, talked to some people. They told me some weird, wild stuff. But supposedly, one of the most haunted rooms, it's in the keeper's part of the light station. It's just a bedroom over to the side. Because, if those lighthouses, they have like a home built into them, because the keepers have to maintain watch over the lighthouse at all times. If the light goes out, ships at sea could be lost. They could, run aground. There, just bad things can happen if the light goes out. So someone has to live there on site. Well, there's one room in the keeper's house where right there by the fireplace, there's this huge blood stain. And so doing my research, I wanted to make sure I got a picture of the blood stain for the book. So that day I told you I did the tour, talked to some people. I toured the house, and like a lot of historic sites, when you go in them, there was a little gate that blocked the door. You could walk up to the door. There's like a gate, kind of like a baby gate, if you will, that keeps people from going inside and walking around. They want to preserve the history there. So I go to this gate, and I look down. I notice the gate is ajar. It's not quite closed. It's like maybe open 4 or 5 inches. So I'm kind of feeling adventurous. I duck around it. I take a few steps, and I get out my phone and take a picture of the bloodstains right there by the fireplace. So I take a few steps back to the doorway, and I look down at my phone. I'm looking at the picture I just took to make sure it turned out. As I'm looking at my phone, that gate slams shut behind me, or right there at my feet. So I guess whatever's there is saying, hey, we don't want you here, big boy. It's time for you to go. So I got the message, and I wound up what I was doing, and I got out of there. But anyway, yeah, that's my story for, it's not really Gulf Shores, but it's right down the street in Pensacola. Pensacola, a lot of history there, a lot of pirate stuff there in the Panhandle, supposedly from back in the day. But so what I want to do is I'm going to start the show doing some New Year's Eve true crime ghost stories, just weird, wild stuff. And going kind of with the Alabama theme, I want to talk about the Midnight Ride. So the calendar is about to turn to 1953. In the South, there's a huge ice storm. It's frozen solid. So this historic ice storm has grounded every airplane from Alabama to Ohio. I mean, it was a huge storm. Tennessee, Kentucky, just affected the whole Southeast pretty much. even up into the mid-south region. I guess that's what you call like Kentucky. But the show has to go on if you're, a performer, if you're a superstar, if you're a traveling singer. Show goes on, it always does. Well, in the back seat of a baby blue 1952 Cadillac, the most famous man in country music was dying. He was 29 years old, but if you looked at him, gaunt, pale, shaking, you would swear he was 50. Hank Williams had been fired from the Grand Ole Opry. He was divorced. His back was slowly disintegrating from spina bifida. But he had a gig in Canton, Ohio on New Year's Day. And like I told you, his life's spiraling out of control. He needs the money. So what does Hank do? He hires a 17-year-old college freshman named Charles Carr to drive him through the blizzard all the way from Alabama to Ohio. So the journey began with a bad omen in Birmingham. Because of the ice, their flight was canceled and forced them to stop in downtown Birmingham at the Redmont Hotel. It was December 30th, and this would be the last night Hank Williams ever spent in a bed. So, by all accounts, it was a chaotic night in Suite 304. Hank was in severe pain. He was drinking heavily. He ordered room service while women came and went. It was his final burst of life, like a last supper of whiskey, painkillers, and women before the silence of the road. On the morning of New Year's Eve, Hank walked out of the Redmont and climbed into his baby blue Cadillac, and he would never step foot in a hotel room ever again. So the beginning of the end happened a few hours later in Knoxville, Tennessee. Charles and Hank, they stopped at the Andrew Johnson Hotel because the pain had become unbearable for the country music singer. Hank was convulsing with hiccups and tremors, alcohol withdrawal. And Charles Carr, he was just a kid. He didn't know what else to do, so he called a doctor. So enter the man history knows only as Dr. PH. In a room that smelled of stale smoke and sweat, the doctor pulled out a needle. He mixed a cocktail of vitamin B12 and a quarter grain of morphine. He injected it into Hank's arm. What the doctor ignored, or just didn't even care to ask, was that Hank's system was already swimming in chloral hydrate and alcohol. The morphine wasn't medicine. It was the final nail in the coffin. When they left Knoxville, Hank couldn't walk. Hotel staff had to carry him out to his Cadillac, his toes dragged across the carpet. They laid him in the back seat and covered him up with a blanket. He coughed and closed his eyes. And the Cadillac turned north onto Highway 11, and this is where the history gets a little hazy. And this is where the ghost story kind of begins. Somewhere in the darkness of the Tennessee mountains, the coffin stopped. The car was silent, save for the hum of a heater and the rhythm of tires on the icy road. In Blaine, Tennessee, a patrolman pulled the Cadillac over for speeding. The officer shined his flashlight in the back seat. He saw the cowboy hat over the face. He saw the stillness. He told the boy, "He looks dead." Carr, terrified, stammered, "No, sir, he's just sedated." So the cop, he let him go. He let a teenager drive a hearse across the state line. They crossed into Virginia, then West Virginia. The roads were winding, treacherous, pitch black. Charles Carr drove on, glancing in the rearview mirror, seeing nothing but a pile of blankets. At a burger stop in Bristol, Carr asked if Hank wanted a sandwich. There was no answer. Hank, nothing. Carr assumed that Hank was just sleeping back there in the back seat. He got back in the car and drove for a few hours more. It wasn't until 5:30 a.m. outside Oak Hill, West Virginia, that the truth became clear. Carr reached back to adjust the blanket that had slipped off Hank's shoulder. When his fingers brushed Hank's hand, he recoiled. It wasn't just cold. It was stiff. It was the temperature of a meat locker. Carr pulled into a Pure Oil gas station. He ran inside, panic rising in his throat. He told the attendant, "I think he's in trouble." The attendant walked out to the beautiful blue car. He opened the back door. He reached in. He touched the country music legend and pulled his hand back. He looked at the boy, and the words would ring out in the world, "I think he's dead." The autopsy revealed that Hank had died of heart failure brought on by the toxic mix of drugs. But the chilling detail was the rigor mortis. It had already set in. Hank Williams, he hadn't died in West Virginia. He had likely been a corpse since they left Tennessee. The boy had been driving through the mountains with a ghost for nearly 400 miles. The irony of all this, the single that Hank Williams had just released was titled, "I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive." And as you would expect, it hit number 1 immediately after his funeral. So today, the haunting of Hank Williams spans pretty much the entire route from Alabama all the way to West Virginia. At the Redmond Hotel in Birmingham, guests that stay near Suite 3 or 4 report the sudden, overwhelming smell of cigarette smoke and whiskey in the hallway. Some even claim to hear the faint strum of a guitar coming from the empty room, as if he's still playing that final show he never got to finish. I stayed at the Redmond several years ago, and staff members have stories all over the hotel, from the basement all the way to the 3rd floor. So it's not just that one room. The mountains of West Virginia, the locals there have a legend too. They say on New Year's Eve, when a fog rolls thick over the highway, you can sometimes see a blue Cadillac speeding through the curves. And if you look closely as it passes, you can see a pale figure in the back seat. This man, the singer, Hank Sr., trying to make his way to Canton, Ohio. So yeah, it's really wild. Hank, he's such a legendary figure, and his son Hank Williams Jr. had a good run back, I guess, the 80s, and it's nuts because Hank Williams, he died a fairly young man. Had he gone on, I think he's a legend. I mean, he was a pioneer. He was a great songwriter, but because he died so young, he became pretty much an icon in country music. And they don't just see him there. I know over at in downtown Nashville at Tootsie's, they say that he haunts Tootsie's, that honky tonk on Broadway. They say they see him in the alleyway behind Tootsie's, because that's where, the alley behind Tootsie's also leads into the Ryman Auditorium. And there are signs, they say that Hank is also haunting the Ryman. So who knows? I mean, Hank, he was a country music superstar before there were country music superstars, and he was the biggest of the time. But they say that he's still out there. So yeah, it's pretty nuts. So the second thing I want to get to, it's also kind of a New Year's Eve, New Year's kind of story. There's a lie that businesses have told for centuries. It's the lie of safety, the lie that technology has finally beaten nature. In 1912, they said the Titanic was unsinkable. About 9 years before that, in Chicago, they used a different word. In 1903, the Iroquois Theater, it was the jewel of Chicago. Marble pillars, mahogany trim, a $6 million palace built to entertain the wealthy families of the Gilded Age. And on every playbill, on every advertisement, they printed 2 words in bold black ink: absolutely fireproof. So, yeah, it took less than 15 minutes for that lie to kill 602 people. And this just wasn't a fire. It was a massacre caused by locked doors, bribed inspectors, and cheap equipment. It was a tragedy so horrific that the alley behind the theater is still called Death Alley. And if you stand there today in the middle of winter, people say you can still smell the smoke. So this is going to be the story of the Iroquois Theater fire. Let's go to Chicago, December 30th, 1903. New Year's Eve's the next day, 1904 is 2 days away. It's a Wednesday afternoon during the holiday break. The city is freezing, but inside the Iroquois Theater, it's warm and it's packed. The theater had only been open for 5 weeks. It was rushed. The owners, Will Davis and Harry Powers, they wanted those holiday ticket sales. So they cut some corners. They bribed city inspectors to look the other way. And here's the objective truth about this fireproof building. It had no fire alarm connected to the city. There was no sprinkler system because the owners thought the pipes were unsightly, quote unquote. It had no exit signs because they thought the red lights would distract the people in attendance from the show. And the fire extinguishers, they didn't have any. Instead, they had tubes of something called kill fire. And if you know what kill fire is, it's essentially baking soda in a tin tube. You were supposed to, if there's a fire wherever you were, you're supposed to throw this powder in this container. You throw the powder on the fire and it would smother it. But essentially it was useless. But it was cheap. And that's important if you're cutting corners at a theater. Make all the money you can. So on this Wednesday afternoon, days before New Year's Day, 1,900 people are packed into the auditorium. And it's important to note who were in the seats. Because it's the holiday matinee, the crowd is almost entirely mothers and their children. Teachers on holiday break. It's standing room only. The aisles are blocked by people. On stage, the musical comedy Mr. Bluebeard, I don't know why I put Mr. Bluebird, is in its second act. An orchestra is playing in the pit. It's a scene of perfect joy until 3:15. High above the stage, an arc light shorts out. A single spark jumps onto a muslin curtain, and it starts small. The audience actually thinks it's part of the show. They giggle. A stagehand grabs a tube of the kill fire powder and throws it at the flame. It does nothing. The fire climbs higher up into the rigging where tons of painted canvas scenery are hanging. Suddenly, burning debris starts raining out onto the stage. The stage manager yells the command that it's supposed to save everyone. Lower the fire curtain. The Iroquois had an asbestos curtain designed to drop down and seal the stage off from the audience. Well, they lowered it, but it got snagged on a light reflector sticking out from the wall. One side drops, the other side stays up. The curtain hangs there, crooked, and it's useless. And by the way, later tests showed the curtain wasn't even real asbestos. It was wood pulp. So guess what? It catches fire too. Now, basic physics tell us that when smoke needs to go up, it has to go up. The theater had automatic skylights above the stage designed to open and suck the smoke out. But the owners had nailed them shut. Why? To keep people from sneaking onto the roof to watch a show for free. So the smoke has nowhere to go. They're screwed. Well, then the performers panic. They run out the giant backstage door into the alley. And this is the fatal moment. When the back door opens, a rush of freezing winter air hits a superheated fire, and it creates a backdraft. A massive fireball explodes the theater. Because the skylights are sealed, the fire has only one way to go: out. The fire shoots under the stuck curtain and blasts directly into the auditorium. It hits the balcony first. People are incinerated in their seats instantly. The rest, they turn to run. And this is where the corruption turns deadly. The audience rushes the exits, but they run into iron gates. The owners had installed quote-unquote basher gates. They're locked metal barriers to keep the cheap seat ticket holders from sneaking into the expensive seats. The crowd presses against these locked gates, and they're trapped like cattle. Those who manage to find a door, they face a problem we don't think about because of this specific fire. The doors open inward. You had to pull them to open them. But when you have 500 terrified people pushing against your back, you can't pull a door open. The pressure pins the doors shut. The bodies pile up against the exits, and they seal their own fate. Now, some people made it to the fire escapes, but the fire escapes aren't finished. They open the door and find nothing. Just an icy metal platform with no stairs. People are pushed out by a crowd behind them. They fall to the frozen alley below. Painters working in the building next door, they're seeing this happen, and they're the real heroes. They grab a long wooden plank and shove it across the alley gap, making a makeshift bridge. A few lucky people crawled across. But, it's wintertime. The plank is icy. Most slipped and fell to the pavement. Well, the fire department extinguished the flame in less than 30 minutes. The interior of the theater wasn't even destroyed. The velvet seats were still there. The fire had simply consumed the oxygen and the people. Firefighters entered the building and they find bodies stacked 7 and 8 deep at the doors. They are entangled so tightly they have to be pulled apart. 602 people died that day. They moved the bodies into the alley behind the theater, and it became a canyon of the dead. And here's the ugliest part of human nature. While the bodies were lying there waiting for wagons, looters moved in. People walked through the rows of dead mothers and children, stealing rings, necklaces, and fur coats. The saloon next door, the Buffalo, was turned into a makeshift morgue. And the owners, Mr. Davis, Mr. Powers, They hired the highest priced attorneys in Chicago. They used their political connections. Well, despite the bribes, the nailed shut vents and locked gates, no one served any prison time. The only justice came in the form of a metal bar. The panic bar or crash bar that you see on every exit door in America today was invented because of this fire. Well, the Iroquois was demolished, and today the James M. Nederlander Theater, formerly the Oriental, stands on the exact same footprint in Chicago's Loop. But the alley remains. It's officially called Couch Place, but locals today still know it as Death Alley. It's always going to be Death Alley. It's widely considered to be one of the most haunted locations in Chicago. Actors performing at the current theater have reported seeing a shadow man watching them from the balcony during rehearsals. In the basement, where the children's bodies are temporarily stored, employees report extreme cold spots and sometimes hear the sound of children crying. But the alley is where the energy is usually the strongest. People who walk through Couch Place, even people who don't know the history, often report the overwhelming smell of burning wood and just that rotten smell of burning flesh. There are photos taken by tourists that show faint, transparent figures hovering near the fire escapes. And legend has it that if you stand in the alley at 3:15 on December 30th, you can hear the faint sound of screaming echoing off the brick walls. Yeah, we assume that when we walk into a building, we're going to be safe. We assume the exit signs are going to work. We assume the doors are going to open. But safety costs money. In 1903, the owners of the Iroquois, they decided safety was much too expensive. Man, that's a pretty heavy episode for New Year's. Yeah, but man, New Year's is coming. 2026 will be here in a couple of days. I'm looking forward to 2026. I was looking at my calendar, and I have some dates open. If you have an event, or if you know someone has an event and needs a speaker, hit me up. You can find me on AlanSircy.com. You can find me on all the Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Yeah, and leave some more questions. Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook, Southern Ghost Stories Instagram. Also, leave a review for the podcast, wherever you found us, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Those help us out and help us climb the ranks, and I definitely appreciate you guys taking a few minutes of your time to do it for me. Also, got the books out there, Hex, The Voodoo Doctor, Sausage King, The Murder Mystery in Chicago. Lots of new books this year, and I got a lot more coming next year. So, yeah, hope you guys had a Merry Christmas, and you guys have a great New Year. And I look forward to doing more shows next year. I'll see you guys soon. Check out the exclusive shirts from Monster City Madhouse, Gravestone, Rocktober, and Val Halloween. All that and much more at MonsterCityMadhouse.com.